gift, and I never should have started using it, but I break the findings. Because a lot of what I do with working out with Shakespeare is meetings with other people. We prepare and we decide to take on a different play and sit around and read, which is one of the most common ways in which Shakespeare has been used historically, incidentally. One of my favorite recent books is Team of Rivals. Do you know the book? It's allegedly Barack Obama's favorite book during the campaign. It's about Abraham Lincoln forming his cabinet.
Oh, yeah.
And one of the things that they refer to in this book is Team of Rivals is that he brought into his cabinet many of his opponents.
Yeah.
In order to, and the phrase that he says, "I'd rather have them in the tent pissing out." But one of the activities they engaged in the White House was they'd get together, this cabinet get together and read Shakespeare out loud. Okay, a very kind of interesting, you know, thing. It's been a form of entertainment that way. All right, let me hear some of your ideas. I know where it's going. I don't buy these anymore because MIT has the entire works of Shakespeare online for free. It's public domain. So you can Google the complete works of Shakespeare at MIT, and it will take you to the website, and you can just block, copy it, paste it into Word documents, and you don't have to pay for them anymore. I mean, it's probably worth buying a copy if you're going to work with the play because the notes are sometimes useful. But for the raw text, it's freely accessible. Let's hear some. Let's start on my right.
All right. So I guess one of the things that we noticed that all of us talked about was the fact that his work is timeless. Like the fact that it's still relevant in today's society. The themes, the messages.
Yes.
Hey.
Save some time.
Copycats.
Okay.
So
Okay, sorry, I interrupted you explaining what that means.
yeah, it's just the messages, you know, are still important to us today. So I mean, that's definitely. I mean, this happened. You know, he wrote these things years and years ago. It's,
Okay, so let's challenge. How many years ago?
I don't know.
Give me an approximate time.
1400,
500.
1500 years ago.
Oh, no,
He died in 1623.
Oh.
Okay, so it's from 1500 to 1620. It's over 400 years old. Who was in charge of England when he was around?
Some king,
Oh,
someone,
right.
King Edward, someone.
Queen Elizabeth I was Queen of England and the British Empire Empress during the first part of his life, and she died during his career. And James of Scotland was brought down, literally. It's a big issue in England about succession. You understand? Elizabeth's father was Henry VIII.
Oh.
Yeah.
I'm Henry VIII. Oh, okay, a different Henry. Yeah, but he had a lot of wives. Why did he have a lot of wives?
Because he was king.
Because he wanted,
have a
he wanted a
son.
son. He wanted a male child for succession. Because before Henry's father and grandfather and great-grandfather were involved in 3 generations of wars in England about the succession of the crown. Who was supposed to succeed? The Wars of the Roses, a group of Shakespeare's plays, are about that time, and the succession was hot. And when Queen Elizabeth was kind of a coalition choice, she really wasn't the only child. She really wasn't a male, but she was acceptable to most of the nobles, and it was the first time in England that the nobles had to kind of agree with who was going to be the regent. She had no son because she never married. And so when she died, the succession thing is a big deal again. And Shakespeare actually wrote 2 plays which were in support of the British monarchy and the transition. One was the play Henry VIII, which is about more about Elizabeth's birth. Elizabeth gets born at the end. The little baby gets carried on at the last stage, and there are a big celebration with cannons going off to celebrate the Queen Elizabeth's victory. It was really sucking up to the Queen, telling her how great she was, because it's written while she was alive, and telling her how wonderful it was that she was born and eventually became Queen. One production of that play actually burned down the theater that Shakespeare, Blackfriars Theater, that Shakespeare's company was using, because the cannon set off the theater.
Now, is she the one that was born to Catherine?
You know, I don't remember.
Because she, I forget what it was myself, but it was a lot of drama.
Yes, it was a great deal of drama, and the play Henry VIII, which is one of Shakespeare's longer plays, lays that out. And for most Americans, that play falls very flat because we're not connected to the history of the succession, which was a big deal for at least 7 of Shakespeare's plays. The other play that I mentioned, which Shakespeare wrote to justify the king, actually King James, was the play Macbeth, the Scottish play, because in the play, the survivor was King James' great-great-grandfather. And it made an argument in the play for his right to succeed as a king in England, and that was sucking up to the new king. Shakespeare wasn't opposed to being that one. So timeless. Now, all right. So we've got 1600s to now, over 400 years. That's pretty strong qualifying for timeless. Okay. There are other playwrights at that time who are performed today, nowhere near with the popularity that Shakespeare is.
That's what we added to the timeless part. Mostly, not just that it's still around, but just so many people still produce it and translate it and come up with new versions of it. It's just endless.
It is so many productions, etc. Not only plays, movies,
Right.
operas, novels, murder mysteries, songs, Broadway musicals, all based on Shakespeare themes and based on West Side Story, one of the most popular musicals of modern times, based on the Romeo and Juliet story, and so many different variations, so many opportunities for creative expression, not all of which I particularly value. Okay, absolutely the case. Is a trivia question you now know the answer to. The second most published book in the history of the United States. Oh, come on, I don't ask hard questions. Shakespeare.
Bible.
Complete
Bible's
Works,
number
Bible.
1.
Macbeth.
Shakespeare's number, no,
Hamlet.
Shakespeare, the complete works of Shakespeare.
Yeah.
It was, interestingly enough, the most common book carried by soldiers during the Civil War, and also during the Napoleonic Wars.
Wow.
On both sides, French and English in the Napoleonic Wars at Waterloo carried copies of Shakespeare. During our Revolutionary War, when Washington had all those guys in Valley Forge freezing their butts off all winter, they entertained themselves by putting on Shakespeare plays. And so did the British, who happened to be in Philadelphia at the time, and very often they were performing the same plays. I mean, it really is a form of recreation that's very, very, very positive. And so there's got to be something there, is my point. What else we got?
Let's
Back to you.
see. We said that he is a great communicator. Like his stories are intricate, I guess.
Okay,
Like
so I
the
slipped
language and
into
Yeah.
uppercase there. I
It
didn't mean
sounds
to.
pretty. There's a lot
Well,
of like good.
he also gives vision. I think he gives the person who's interpreting pretty.
a lot of metaphors. And,
Yeah, but you
symbolism.
can visualize, I think, once you get it, or once you're trying to get it.
I just shifted to the other
Yeah.
side there. I heard the
That's a
name.
big one.
Once you get it.
Yeah.
He may be a great communicator. I'm not a great typist or speller. Comment about his plots. Of all Shakespeare's plays, There is apparently only one of them that has an original plot that Shakespeare made up.
Oh.
Let me say it again. He cribbed all of the other plots.
God.
Okay. Every other story that he told was a story that he borrowed from some pre-existing source. Not that he copied the plays, although that may have happened sometimes. It was not uncommon for playwrights to copy from each other. But one of Shakespeare's gifts was he frequently took 2 or 3 different stories and wove them together into the same play. So The Merchant of Venice is a really good example of a case where there are 3 different plots going on, about an unfaithful daughter, and about a search for the right love, and about a Jewish moneylender, and about a merchant who is really, the merchant is a minor character in the play. You know, people think the main character in that play is Shylock, who is not the merchant. He's a lawyer, and he happens to be a Jew, and it allowed Shakespeare to comment on anti-Semitism, which the Germans didn't invent. And it was right certainly in the time of Shakespeare. But the fact that he was able to retell stories. Now, well, here's an implication to you. If he stole well-known stories, what does that mean about his audience expectation when they come into the play? They're not expecting to be surprised. They already know the stories. It was common at Shakespeare's time that people would go see Shakespeare's plays 4 or 5 times. Okay, not because it wasn't to go to be surprised with the stories. One of our things in modern culture is we watch TV and we're disappointed if we're not surprised by the twist in the story. Okay, but Shakespeare, you know, my wife and I like to use the DVR, the digital recorder, on a cable, and we record shows, so we spend the weekend watching the shows that we didn't catch up on in the week. As soon as we're done with the show, what do we do with it? We erase it, we delete it. I don't go back and watch The Closer over and over and over again, because it's done its thing, it satisfies me, and I know what's going on. I rarely watch a TV show again. It's a repeat. Okay, it was common for people to go back to Shakespeare again and again. I want to make that point a number of times. Common for people to go back to Shakespeare again and again. So what were they after?
New meaning? Something you missed?
New meaning?
I'd
What
say
they missed
new
before?
detail.
New
Deeper meaning.
details?
Yeah.
Deeper meaning.
Deeper
thinking.
meaning, okay. And most of them just to be distracted, to be entertained. You think about what you might know about the early 1600s. What did people have for entertainment? Most of them were illiterate,
Talking.
so they talked. They told stories. They sang songs.
They played music.
They played music. They went to watch public executions. They went to watch public floggings.
Some
They,
things haven't changed.
So there's a great line from Shakespeare wrote prologues to many of his plays, which was a speech that an actor would come out and deliver the speech to let the audience know that the play was about to start. Because they would picture something about the theaters at the time. They didn't have curtains. Okay, the theater was a thrust stage into the middle of a pit. Okay, thrust stage, so it came out about maybe twice as far as me to the blackboard, and maybe as wide as this, into the pit, which was an area on the ground, which was probably covered with sand and sawdust. And those were the cheap seats. There weren't any seats in those cases. People would stand down on the ground. They were called the groundlings. They were the cheap seats. It was where the ruffians went. It's where the poor people went, because it cost less than the equivalent of a day's salary at the time, so a fraction of a penny to get in to see a Shakespeare's play. Okay, it was common entertainment. And so this prologue to the Henry V play starts, has a line in it that says, can this cockpit hold the vast fields of France? Referring to the theater as a cockpit. What is a cockpit?
Airplane.
What?
Airplane.
No, they didn't have airplanes.
No, I know, I thought that's what you were saying.
What is it? So what would a
Cockfights.
cockpit have been?
That's what
Well, they had
they-
cockfights.
Fights.
They would have animals fighting each other for entertainment. So on the ground where the cheap seats were, the cheap standing room was, perhaps that morning or the next day, they would have a bunch of roosters killing each other, or bear baiting was common. They would have a bear, a real bear, and the dogs would try to tear apart the bear, and people would pay to sit and watch it and gamble on it, and it was entertainment. They didn't have gladiators at that time. They didn't make people kill each other, but they made animals kill each other for entertainment. So this is, they didn't have a lot of sports, okay? You didn't have rugby, you didn't have soccer, football for mass entertainment. So the theater, which was a very new development in Shakespeare's time. Many of you might know that there's a theater called the Rose that was associated with Shakespeare, that was built and rebuilt just recently in England, and was featured in that movie Shakespeare in Love, with an accurate reproduction of the Rose. So here's the trivia question. 40 years before the Rose was built, the first place for providing, the first building was built to provide dramatic entertainment in London, and it was called, its name was?
Round?
The Globe?
No, it said the Globe was one of them, but not the first one. They actually tore apart this other one to build the Globe. It was called theater.
Oh,
I said, I don't
original.
ask hard questions.
Oh, man.
Another hard question. Oh, how many times does Shakespeare mention tea?
T as in.
T-E-A.
Like a cup of tea.
Just a cup of tea.
I don't know, probably not at all.
Never. Where did England get tea from? India. They hadn't been there yet in the 1600s.
Wow.
Okay, Shakespeare didn't know from tea. Okay, so much that we think of as typically British is just not Shakespeare, or rather not any more Shakespeare than we are, because we descend from him. John, all right, let me continue this exercise. Anything else on the positive side?
We said he was a pioneer, very ahead of his time. He brought up a lot of, kind of like, I thought of Ophelia being kind of a little crazy and off her rocker. And we didn't think that that was commonly talked about, human issues. He was a risk taker.
Use the British spelling. Presentation of human dysfunction.
Yeah.
Ophelia's not the only example.
Yeah.
Lady Macbeth, classic example of obsessive compulsive. Hamlet, classic presentation of depression. Obsessions. Let me talk about which I, in agreement with you, the way in which he really was the pioneer was he displayed inner thoughts. And it's through that we see the craziness. Okay. Prior to Shakespeare, plays were declaiming pageants. They would people would stand up and they would describe what happened. Okay. Even going back to the Greek